Good day. Today's lecture is devoted to the forms of training teachers. This topic is especially significant because the quality of education depends not only on student preparation, but also on the continuous professional development of the teacher. In contemporary conditions, pedagogical work requires regular renewal of knowledge, reconsideration of methods, and readiness to respond to changing educational demands. Therefore, the question of how teachers themselves are trained becomes a matter of central pedagogical importance. At the outset, the lecture formulates its purpose in two related directions. First, it seeks to identify the problem of defining appropriate forms of professional teacher training. Second, it aims to activate professional preparation in response to the insufficient development of such forms. Accordingly, the discussion is organized around two main themes: professional training as such and the group method of organizing classes. This structure is methodologically appropriate because it moves from the general problem of teacher development to one of its most active and practically significant forms. This slide makes clear why professional training remains necessary throughout a teacher's career. Educational content is constantly renewed. Consequently, the teacher must periodically engage in training or self-training in order to strengthen professional qualities and remain pedagogically effective. At the same time, the slide draws attention to an important limitation of the traditional lecture format. Although it remains widespread, it often places participants in a passive position, where they primarily listen, record, and consume information. Therefore, the key challenge today is to identify forms of professional development that are more activating, participatory, and transformative. The lecture then identifies two important contradictions. The first is the growing need to activate professional training alongside the insufficient development of the forms capable of doing so. The second concerns changing expectations for teachers together with resistance or unwillingness to adapt to modern conditions. These contradictions are pedagogically significant because they reveal that the problem is not merely organizational. Rather, it concerns the alignment between the demands placed on the teacher and the methods through which the teacher is professionally formed. Consequently, the modernization of teacher training appears not as a desirable option, but as an urgent necessity. This slide presents several tested forms of professional teacher training: the seminar, the method of specific situations, the business game, the creative workshop, and the round table. Each of these forms has a distinct pedagogical function. The seminar provides structured short-term work on a specific issue. The method of specific situations introduces realistic cases for analysis. The business game models interaction directed toward professional goals. The creative workshop immerses participants in search and self-knowledge. Finally, the roundtable encourages freer and more flexible discussion. Taken together, these forms show that professional teacher training can and should move beyond one-dimensional transmission of information. The group method is presented here as a form of active interaction based on equality, communication, and shared experience. Each participant, regardless of professional status or length of service, is treated as a full member of the group deserving respect. As a result, training takes place not through passive reception, but through intensive dialogue and collective problem solving. The slide also notes that optimal group size ranges from 3 to 9 people, and that the moderator plays an organizing role. This is important because productive group work requires both freedom and structure. Therefore, the group method should be understood as a pedagogically arranged form of collaborative professional growth. The seminar is shown here as a 5-stage structure, consisting of getting started, theoretical mastery, practical work, reflection, and summary. This sequence is pedagogically meaningful because it mirrors the movement from orientation to understanding, from understanding to activity, and from activity to reflective consolidation. In other words, the seminar is not merely a shorter lecture. Rather, it is a form of organized professional work in which atmosphere, theory, practice, reflection, and conclusion are integrated into one coherent process. The method of specific situations is based on ready-made written scenarios that imitate real-life professional circumstances and remain open in their outcome. Teachers are required to analyze these situations and propose their own solutions. This method is especially valuable because it changes the participants' relation to learning. Instead of receiving finished answers, teachers assume responsibility for interpretation and judgment. Consequently, the method increases engagement, strengthens accountability for results, and prepares participants to make more confident decisions in real pedagogical practice. This slide brings together two particularly active forms of professional development. Business games model interaction aimed at achieving practical goals and thereby develop decision-making, innovation, analysis, and systematic thinking. Creative workshops, by contrast, immerse participants in a process of search and self-knowledge, supported by an atmosphere of openness, trust, and dialogue. Thus, while both forms are active, they differ in emphasis. Business games are oriented more strongly toward modeled professional action, whereas creative workshops place greater weight on reflective and developmental experience. The round table is presented as a format characterized by ease of organization, informality, participant autonomy, and the absence of rigid procedural rules. This does not mean, however, that it lacks pedagogical value. On the contrary, its flexible structure often encourages more active involvement and more natural professional dialogue. Because participants are free to speak when ready and are not constrained by overly strict order, the round table may create conditions in which exchange becomes more sincere, responsive, and intellectually mobile. Therefore, this form is especially useful where collegial discussion and shared reflection are required. The final thematic slide identifies several essential conditions of successful professional training, varied forms, proper organizational conditions, and active participation by teachers themselves in determining priorities and contributing to planning. This is a highly important conclusion. Professional growth cannot be sustained through one repeated format alone, and it requires diversity, purposeful organization, and genuine participant involvement. The slide also names the expected outcomes: increased professionalism, greater productivity, transfer of knowledge into practice, and satisfaction of professional development needs. In this respect, teacher training is successful when it leads not only to temporary instruction, but to renewed professional energy and effectiveness. Thank you for your attention. I hope this lecture has clarified the principal forms of teacher training and has shown why active, participatory, and professionally meaningful formats are essential for continuous pedagogical development.